Amazing. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Justina Kanza. I am the founder and CEO here at Granted. We've been in market over a year now. We were actually just recently celebrating our 1 year anniversary and reminiscing on how much growth we've had over the past year, including really building out version 2 of the platform from when we started, having about 1,000 users and our users receiving over 100K worth of funding from the platform and just so much success and impact in the community. Outside of Granted, I'm also the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Okwera Academy. We support BIPOC and rural folks with capacity building, capital, and community to launch careers and businesses. Actually, Deborah on the call was in one of our accelerators where her venture won a grant from us. But it was through that process of running the nonprofit, as well as serving over 5,000 Black entrepreneurs at University of Toronto Entrepreneurship, and I myself raising over $2 million worth of grants from funders like MasterCard, the City of Toronto, University of Toronto, Government of Canada, to name but a few. It was from this process that I really experienced firsthand, but also secondhand, how broken and fragmented and challenging the process of grant seeking is, and thereby had the desire to build a solution. And here we are today. The flow of this session will be as much interaction as we can master so that I'm hearing from you what you need to get out of the session. I always start with this big number that is sometimes shocking, but sometimes not so shocking to people, which is the estimated amount of funding available in Canada, and some of it left on the table every year because of this problem that I experience and that I imagine a lot of you folks experience because you're on this call today. And so I'm going to start with a question. I'm curious to hear, what is the single most frustrating bottleneck keeping you from submitting and securing more grants? Because if you're on this call, I want to safely assume that is the problem, that you're not submitting as many grants as you possibly could, and you're not securing as many grants for your beautiful and impactful ventures as you possibly could. So what are some of the problems that you have been experiencing? I think oftentimes, especially when you're in certain industries that are considered niche, it's very challenging to find grants for you, especially if you don't necessarily know how to maneuver yourself and really design projects that are not necessarily exactly what your venture is doing, but still align with your venture and align with the funder. And that's probably my favorite topic of all time. So we're going to talk about that, where to find grants. And if you're not finding the right grants for you, maybe the problem is that you're not positioning yourself to be aligned with those grants in the first place. So we'll talk about project design that makes you fundable. Dana, about finding one that is for pre-revenue startup, right? It takes a lot of creativity. We'll talk about that. Traction. Traction is a big one as well. Proof of concept is what I call it. Later in the call, you'll see that I talk about a universal equation. Secure yourself grants and make yourself fundable. And one of the pieces as part of that equation is proof of concept. And we'll talk about how sometimes we have a limited and narrow view of what traction and proof of concept looks like. So I'll give some examples on how to be creative around that and how to create your own traction if you don't have traction. Tanya, you say short intakes for large grants that require a lot of time and even council approval. Yes. And also matching funding is sometimes a challenge, definitely a big challenge on the discovery part. Short intakes is also such a huge one, which is why this call is interestingly necessary right now, right? Because we're talking about how do you make sure you have everything ready before these short intakes come along, so that when an opportunity comes, even if it's one that you discovered yesterday and the deadline is today, you have the whole package ready and you just really tailor it to that particular application. So we talk about some of those checklists and how to maneuver really automation of some of the administrative pieces so that you can write more grants in a shorter period of time. Okay, so yeah, those really align with the problems that I have faced personally, but also heard from founders all the time, especially having served so many of them. It's like it's time consuming and fragmented. It is complex. Sometimes you don't really understand what the funders are looking for, which is made even more challenging because we don't often have enough of a direct line with the program managers or the folks from the funding office to be able to have these conversations with them. which is something that here at Granted we do, is we bring on funders, especially during intake calls, so that you can have one-on-one conversations with them through our platform and really get a better understanding of their priorities, in addition to the insights and the data that we provide on our platform. Discovery is always top of mind, which is ironic because there's a lot of databases. There's a lot of databases that offer grants, but just the database itself is not enough. You need hyper matching, because sometimes it feels like you're trying to find a needle in a haystack. So all of these are things that you're sharing, but that I've also heard from a lot of the founders that we've served. The manual tracking is another one, especially if you're a small team. And to your point, Tanya, you're working with short intakes and there's so many deadlines up in the air and you got to get funding approval, but then there's a deadline for that. And for that, it's also really, how do we automate that process to make it as easy as possible for you? So these are the problems that I believe are more systemic in terms of how the funding landscape is created. There's also a problem that is more individualistic, the things that you as a grant seeker can do on the day to day, right? And these are some of the common mistakes that I see, because I find that a lot of grant writers don't take a pause to really audit on what are some of the systems that we have currently. How are we seeking for funding in a way that is either getting us rejected or not getting us seen in the first place? And I've categorized these common mistakes in three main pillars. And the first one is the misalignment trap. And this is the one that gets you rejected just by screening. Like I mentioned, we gave some money just a few months ago now to Deborah's organization, right? And I was part of the team that was deliberating to say, okay, who gets the funding, and understanding what makes for a project to be fundable and to stand out of 3, 4, however many. And so there's certain mistakes that just first glance as an adjudicator will lead to me immediately disqualifying you. So the part of it is applying for the funding without deeply understanding the funder priorities, which we talked about, right? That is whether you're sending a generic copy and pasted proposal without really reading and tailoring it to the narrative that the funder talks about, that being their priority. Whether that's not doing research about the funder's historical giving patterns. There's a lot of different data points that keep you misaligned. And one of the things that I really like about our platform is we've created it to actually solve for this problem. I have this, I do not have that, right? I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, we were applying for funding from a nonprofit. It was 300K. And there was 3 stages of the application. We made it through the first stage, we were shortlisted to the final stage, and we got rejected despite having such a strong application, even that so much so that the program managers and adjudicators were like, yep, this application is strong. You guys are going to have high likelihood of getting it. And so when we sat down with them after we got rejected, it turns out that there was one small criteria that we missed out on, that was the only thing truly that got us disqualified. And that criteria was, this funder did not want for the project to be associated with any organization. They wanted it to be a project led by individual youths, a coalition of individual youths that are running this project. So had I done exactly the same application, exactly the same project, but not name it under the nonprofit, we would have gotten that funding. But in between the 5-10 pages of narratives and requirements and eligibility, and I was doing it manually at the time, I missed on this and I was misaligned and I was rejected on a very huge funding opportunity, right? So never apply blindly. Utilize advanced funder insights, data-driven analysis to ensure your organization matches this mandate. And I'll show you shortly how our platform aligns with that. The second piece is the desperation narrative. Now, this is rejection by lack of proof. Essentially, funders are not necessarily funding struggling businesses or just entire businesses in general. So to your point, Rotimi, you talked about your e-commerce business, right? So part of the reason why you might not be finding funding or even getting rejected for funding is probably because you're trying to apply for funding for the business as opposed to the different operational and projects within the business. So Funders are looking to, because the business as a whole obviously carries so much risk. But when you de-risk the business by creating specific projects, and a project is, if you, what they taught us in like primary school, high school, SMART goals, a project is specific, a project is measurable, it is achievable, it is time bound, it is realistic. And funders want to fund this because it reduces the risk versus a whole business which does not have a start and an end. A project will have a start and an end, right? So that's the narrative piece. The other mistake that goes under this piece of desperation, a reactivity to looking for funding versus a proactivity, is asking for capital without having a structured fundable project, a narrative that is clearly mapped out. And we'll spend majority of this call really talking about how do we create this fundable project narrative in the first place, because that's going to be your blueprint for everything that you apply for funding for. If you spend the time, even with our platform, and I'll show you how you can do it in such a short period of time, if you spend just an hour or 2 hours really investing in understanding your narrative, your project narrative, the multiple different project narratives within your organization, this will help save you so much time because you can start applying for grants with a template that is already set. And then you're also better able to understand what funding aligns with what your projects are. And you're not trying to squeeze a square into a circle or vice versa, right? You are going for alignment. And so make sure you clearly, as part of this narrative, define success metrics, expected outcomes, and we'll talk a little bit about the logical framework, a theory of change that aligns with this. And the other piece is operational fragmentation. And this I find is the most avoidable thing. This is rejection by technicality. And this is more so rejection by, like, self-rejection really is what it is, because you don't even get to the point of applying for a grant because you were so busy with the many other important things that you have to do for your business. But you have systems for all of those things. You have systems for your sales, you have systems for your marketing, you have systems for your finance, but you do not have systems for your grant seeking. And that is operational fragmentation that really leads to self-rejection because you're relying on manual tracking and Excel sheets and managing multiple grants efficiently. And when you do that, you juggle multiple oranges, one orange is bound to fall, right? And the likelihood of you even doing it with such efficiency and such high detail and diligence, I guess is the word, are low because you're managing so many things and you don't have a system around this. So these are some of the things that I'll hope to solve for on this call. And I'll show you how our platform was very, very intentionally designed and built with this in mind. Now, first, like I said, I want to talk about the funding piece and really helping you go from being reactive, which is very, very frustrating, to being more strategic and systemic driven, where you're aligned with the funders, your operations are top notch and really systemic, as well as really understanding what project you're looking to get funded for in the first place. Yeah, please feel free to add in the comments any questions that come up. I want this to be as interactive as possible. I see Dana saying this is absolutely you. Yep. First things first, foundational shifts. The first thing that I always talk about is getting people to stop thinking about the money. Like, I know we're here to talk about the money. The money is important. The money is what helps us do the work. But before you get to the money, a lot of us skip a crucial step, which is really focusing on what you want to get funded before focusing on the funding. And so in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about how to build a winning project and really define exactly what your next big initiative using three key frameworks that I've put together, one of them being the theory of change. Now, the theory of change is essentially your story of your initiative and your impact, because at the end of the day, everything comes down to storytelling. I have seen as a funder, me myself sitting in the funder seat, I'll actually tell an example of a pitch competition. And there was 10 people pitching for, I think, $10,000. The first 9 people pitched. They pitched really well, but the 10th person that was meant to pitch he was traveling, and that was when I was in Toronto. He was traveling from Montreal to Toronto to pitch, but was stuck in a blizzard. This was January, like 2023, stuck in a blizzard. And so we were like, this person is stuck. I don't know if we can let them teach. The judges went into the green room. We deliberated and we came up with who the winner was. And towards the end, just as the judges were leaving the room, this person finally made it to Toronto and they were like, please, can you give me the 5 minutes to pitch? I know it's last minute. I really will appreciate it. And he took on the stage. Last person, like half the crowd has left already because it's been a long day waiting, took the stage and told the story so beautifully, so captivatingly that 3 minutes into his speech, the judges were messaging the facilitators to say, I know we already adjudicated and we already selected a winner, but we want this person to be the winner. And the only thing, well, they had a good product, sure, but what he did differently on that stage is just how beautifully he told his story with such conviction, with such understanding that as much as there is all this jargon, whether it's e-commerce jargon or you're working in tech or in health, as much as there is all this jargon that you're trying to communicate the value of your product and offering to whoever is across the table, as much as all of that exists, the other thing that exists across the table is a human being, right? A human being, and a human being who has emotions, who has biases, and a human being who's looking to connect. And how you connect is the story, and your story is your theory of change, right? And this is a narrative that not only connects your actions to the impact, but also to the change that you want to create and the impact that you want to see and the emotions that come from that impact. This looks like different things in different contexts. The story is also important because in the world of AI, and you will see on our platform that our platform is AI powered, but I always talk about the difference between our platform and many other platforms is that we are what I call AI meets HI. The HI is the human intelligence. The human intelligence is the story. The human intelligence is the story and the experiences of the work that you're doing on the ground. So our platform, as AI centric as it is not meant to be your only tool in creating your grants. The other two that you have is your human intelligence and your voice, but you cannot properly insert that. To your point, Tanya, if you've got a short period intake, you've got so many things happening and you've got so much to do. So our AI on our platform is meant to really automate the administrative pieces and bring you to at least 80% completion. So all the things that you answer all the time, tell us your name, what does your business do? Like you shouldn't be saying those things over and over again. We automate that so that you can now insert the story of that one young girl who was impacted by your project when you did it previously and how it changed her life and how that emotion of that one life changed and the ripple effect of it is actually going to connect with the funder and give you the money. So that's emphasis on the impact of storytelling. But when we talk of the theory of change, there's 4 simple questions here that we want to answer. And the first is your big goal. What is your ultimate audacious vision, right? Why is this important? Because this is the problem that you're solving. And this is really how you achieve. So I'll give an example. I always use the example of the food deserts in Scarborough. So for example, the food deserts in Scarborough, reducing that is your big audacious goal. And that's something that your project is hoping to do. And the next thing that you want to do is the why. Okay, so why is this important? Why is this problem important to solve? Right. And this is really, so for example, because residents of Scarborough lack access to fresh and healthy food. And when people don't have fresh and healthy food, there is maybe an economic issue that comes from that. There is, let's say, health issues, right? So the thing has gone from food deserts, which seems like agricultural. It has also now gone towards health. So this project could then potentially fit into agriculture grants. It can potentially fit into health grants because you're understanding the why and you're really being a little kid here and asking the 5 whys, right? Because residents lack access to fresh food. Okay, why? Then you go deep to the next reason why they lack access to food. Okay, what happens when they lack access to food? So asking all of these questions helps you map out the different underlying problems within the problem and within the big goal that you're trying to solve for. And the other thing that's important is the how. So, okay, now we understand why you're doing this. How are you going to do it? The how is important because this is your unique strategy and intervention. And maybe it's also not unique because I think we live in a world that is so, I want to create a disruptive business and etc. And maybe that sells to VCs and whoever is looking for a huge return on their business. But sometimes boring and familiar is valid because that's been done before. what have people done in when they have food deserts? Maybe it's not a new intervention. So now I'm bringing that to Scarborough, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to build a community-based urban network. So don't be necessarily stuck on being disruptive. Although strategic and unique and innovation is always welcome, because sometimes innovation leads to scalability, and founders want to see that what this person is doing this project in such a unique and innovative way that it's going to scale beyond just 100 people. Whereas the current process gets us 100 people, this innovation gets us 1,000 people impacted. So maybe sometimes disruption and innovation works. You have to discern, but the how is important as part of your theory of change. Right. Now, the outcomes. The outcome is your North Star. The outcome is so important because this is what quantifies the work that you're doing. The outcome is the specific measurable change that the world will see because of your work. When you build this community-based urban farming network, what will the people of Scarborough see? Well, there'll be increased food security. It happens when there's increased food security, there's increased and improved community health. What happens when there's improved community health? Well, people are healthy enough to go and work, and that's economic. And when folks that are disproportionately impacted by these food deserts, like marginalized folks, there's more community wealth in communities that historically do not have as much wealth, because now they have food, now they can work. So all of these different things, once you map these things out, you see so many outcomes that also scream buzzwords. Buzzwords like food security, buzzwords like community health, economic improvement and economic development. Now, this project could potentially fit into grants that are, if the Ministry of Economic Development, if the Ministry of Economic Development had a grant that was available, somehow, if you played your cards right and if you told the story well enough, this food desert project and problem you're solving for could be connected to the economic development if you can map it out well through this theory of change. You have to talk about the theory of how you're going to go from this problem to this outcome. And that is, storytelling is your North Star. This is what gets funders really emotionally invested, especially the outcomes. And it proves that you're focused not just on solving a problem, but really creating meaningful and sustainable impact. So I'll pause here and see if there's anything in the chat before we go to the next piece. So in addition to that, we have the theory of change and logical framework. This is your blueprint for your impact. So if your theory of change is your story, your logical model or logical framework is your blueprint. It turns this is a simple chart that turns your inspiring vision into a credible step-by-step plan, because everyone can dream, but we need to see a plan. We need to see a blueprint of how you're going to bring this to life. And so it maps out your input, and your input is, what do you need? What are the resources that will help you bring this project to life and deliver the outcomes and the impact that you talk about? And these resources, it maps them out to the activities. And the activities is, what will you do with the particular resources you're asking for? And this is very important because I always see it as I love to do it on a whiteboard, because you can easily map, even when you're creating a budget, which is obviously an important part of an application. When you're creating a budget, every piece of the budget line should map out to an activity that you're doing. And every activity should map out to an output. And the output is, what will you produce with this activity and with this resource? And that output that is produced, what is the change, the big outcome that it's connected to? So this is a tool that's really proving to funders that you're a good steward of their capital, and that you're not just a dreamer, you're a builder with a plan. So what this looks like is, so with the example of the Scarborough food deserts, what do you need? You say, hey, I need $10,000, or I need one community manager, which is quantified into $60,000 because that is what their salary is for the year. Okay, why do you need that? So the input, think of the input as the budget. Think of the activities as the work plan. And this is the language that funders use. You've probably seen a budget, you've probably seen a work plan. Your output would be output or measurable impact, something like that. The outcomes will be probably still named outcome or impact. So in your work plan, you will have something like To combat these food deserts, we need to farm. And to farm, we need to secure 2 farm plots. And we need to do weekly farming activities or whatever it case may be. So because you need those farm plots, you need $10,000, right? So that's what that $10,000 maps into. And what will those 10 or 2 farm plots that have been funded by the $10,000 that we've inputted, what will they result as an output? Well, they will produce like 100 tons of lettuce or tomatoes, right? 100 tons of tomatoes. And why is 100 tons of tomatoes important? Well, because now folks have vitamin C, folks have food that they can eat, and that contributes to that 50 families provided with fresh produce weekly, reduced hunger because they have fresh produce, they've got their protein in, they can go and work. It improves our economy, it improves community health. So that's the logical framework. You have to map out each piece. Another mistake that I have made in funding, I've had things on my budget that are not justified anywhere else. Like I will say, for example, I'm running an accelerator where we're training entrepreneurs how to create their own businesses and whatever else, right? And somehow let's say I have on my budget $1,000 to book a venue for a demo day, right? This is a day when our founders come and demonstrate the work that they've done, the businesses that they've built. Sounds good, sounds reasonable on the budget. Except on my work plan and my activities, there's nowhere where I mention a demo day. So there's no alignment there. The opposite of it is not being intentional enough in your design or in your activities or even in the definition of your beneficiaries. You talk about them being single mothers, you talk about them coming out of town for your activities. But nowhere in your inputs do you talk about childcare, for example. Nowhere do you talk about transportation. That is not a logical framework. The logic is not matching. It's not clicking, as they say, right? It's not clicking. 1 plus 1 is not equaling 2. So that's a logical framework and making sure you're very intentional in that design. Map it out if you can. Whatever is on your budget, create an arrow to say, where does this lead in the activity? Where does this activity lead in terms of the output? What is the quantifiable output that comes from this? And this output, what outcome does it lead? And the outcome is where now when we talk about funder priorities, that's where it comes in, because the outcome is what actually matches with what the funders have said are a priority for them. If the government of Canada say this funding is specifically for community health, you have to match your budget to your activity to your output to community health somehow. Right. So that's how you really get your ready. And all of this happens before you even start applying for grants. Like even when we talk of input and budget, I was just reflecting before the call how sometimes we think you don't need a budget unless and until you see the funding, and then you kind of create a budget based on the funding. That's not necessarily how it works. From the get-go, you should create a budget of how much it costs you to run that project without any funding in mind. Ideal situation, how much does it cost you to run that project year on year? So if I'm doing a built in the value project that we do with my nonprofit, how much does it cost me to pay program managers? If we have a demo day every year, how much does it cost me to run that demo, to book venue, to have food at the event, pay facilitators, give funders grants, like have that ready ahead of time. This helps you even when you go meet someone and they ask you how much do you want, like you know how much you want and you can justify that number. Now, when you have that number and then a grant comes along where it obviously does not align with that particular number, then you make adjustments based on that. But something has to give. If $50,000 helps you serve 1,000 people with your project, and a grant is giving you $1,000, do not promise that you will serve 1,000 people with that project. You now adjust those numbers and you prorate it and you kind of do equations based on how much money there is, right? So something has to give. And sometimes funders will tell you, we want 1,000 people served with this funding, but they're only giving you $5,000. How can you possibly make that stretch, right? And so once you know your numbers, you're able to say no to funding opportunities, because sometimes you have to say no to funding opportunities because the application and getting the grants, that is only the first step. After that comes the deliverables. After that comes the implementation. And sometimes the implementation runs literally for years. You get this funding and you'll be locked in for years. And sometimes the funding is even exclusive. They say, we don't want you doing anything else. And so if you don't know all of these things before and you're not ready enough with understanding your projects and what you're looking for, you will fall into this trap. And what will end up happening is you get the money, you have to deliver on a project that you're not passionate about, that you're not well resourced to do, and you probably do a very shitty job, for lack of better words, with it, and that will really friction your relationship with that funder, but also with other funders, right? Because now they're seeing your work and they're like, well, this is not really quality work. And they don't know the context that you're not really given enough money. All they know is that the work is not quality. So all of these things are that you have to get into when it comes to funding. Any questions and thoughts on this? All of these things that I've talked about are kind of covered in universal funding question. So despite where you be, and you guys are across the country, probably across the globe even, and you will see many, many different grants. And the importance of doing all this pre-game work that we talked about is because regardless of the grant, there are certain things that are universal, that every funder everywhere is evaluating you on these same core principles. And that's why I call it the universal funder. So it starts with the story, which we've talked about. And then we have the credible plan, which is our logical model. And then the few things that we haven't covered, which is something that I think, Marsha, you were talking about, is traction, or otherwise known as proof of concept. Have you done this before? What have you done so far? Right? Because funders want to back winners at the end of the day. And the best way to prove that you're a winner and you can do the work is by having done the work before or starting to do the work. And sometimes you don't always have to wait for the funding to begin. Sometimes we get so attached. And I know I talked about the budget and understanding how much it costs you to run that project. And so once you have that ideal scenario, you have to ask yourself, where can I start? I always say, start with what you have and where you are. Sure, my ideal project needs 50K to run, and that project will help me serve 1,000 people. But what does it look like when I serve one person? How much does it cost me to run? What are the resources that I have right now that I can leverage to push this? And I've done this so many times because I looked around me. I was like, okay, this program has to happen because I have a passion for supporting founders. What do I have? I have an office. So we'll use my office every week to run these sessions. What else do I have? I've got relationships. I'm going to leverage the relationships I have to ask these experts to come and run sessions for free or at low cost. What else do I have? I have social capital. I have the brand. I have visibility. I'm going to talk about the work we're doing and see who it attracts, right? So the ideal situation for this project is probably a six-figure amount to properly run this project. That's what we've budgeted for. But we ran the project with less than $3,000. Right. And in that project, we're able to do so much, give a grant of $1,000, have a demo day at a beautiful venue, all of these things, all because I took a seat back to say, what do I have right now? What can I leverage? And start with the minimal. That's the minimal viable product, my friends. In entrepreneurship, right? We talk about prototype, we talk about MVP, your MVP. So think of what that is for your project and start doing it. And as you're doing it, you have to talk about it. You have to be visible about it because you don't know who's listening. And so much so that with the project that the accelerator with the entrepreneurs, we ended up attracting one of the biggest, probably the biggest entrepreneur economic development body in the area. And they want to partner with us on the next cohort for this. So you want to start talking about it because funders want to back winners, and money is tight right now everywhere. Money is tight on a micro and a macro level. And so when people are giving their money, they want a certain level of ease that there's reduced risk, and no better way to show reduced risk than people seeing you do the work and seeing that you've done the work. Another way to really prove traction and proof of concept is borrow from your personal experience, your lived experience. 9 to 5. When I started my nonprofit, the first grant that I received, they asked me a question: have you done this project before? Have you done something like this before? And initially I was like, oh gosh, no, I've never done it, so I'm not going to apply for this. Self-disqualified. But then I took a step back and say, wait a minute, I didn't do it in the context of my nonprofit because my nonprofit is new. But my 9 to 5, this is the work that I do every day. I could do it in my sleep. Okay, so I package that as proof of concept because people invest in projects, yes, but they also invest in people. So that is your traction. Figure out a way to really demonstrate that commitment, demonstrate that de-risking investments to your funders. The next thing you want to add to that equation is your team, right? Because funders are always looking at organizational experience and organizational capacity. If we give you $100,000 to serve 1,000 people, Marshall, do you have the capacity to do that if the team is just Marshall? Maybe not. Right. So you have to start looking at ways that you can increase your organizational capacity, or at the very least, organizational capacity and the team. The challenge here is many folks are solo founders and solopreneurs. And so when we think of team, we're always thinking of core team. We're thinking of who's my co-founder, who's my head of this, who's my manager here. And you don't have that yet in so many cases. But what you do have is perhaps you have volunteers, you have board of directors that have tremendous expertise across different areas. You've got mentors, you've got advisors. Figure out a way to package those as a member of your team. I don't have a legal team. But if a funder came to me and says, do you have legal capacity, legal support? I will say yes, because one of my advisors is a lawyer and they're an extended member of my team, right? Really figure out a way to package that as I have a village supporting me to push this work forward, but also start building actual core team capacity. That is very important because the extended team maybe may help you every now and then, but depending on the grant size, implementation is a lot. Excellent implementation takes a lot. So you need to build a team. So figure out ways to really do this. And there's so many hiring grants out there. Our team is now 10 people strong, almost 12. I only pay salary out of pocket for those 12 for maybe 2 or 3 staff members. Everyone else is paid for by a funder somewhere, a grant somewhere, because there's so many of these. We have some of them on our platform, and you have to figure out ways to be very scrappy and creative with creating your organizational capacity this way. Most importantly, we want ROI. Everything comes back to ROI. And so when you're talking to venture capitalists and when you're talking to investors and things, people of that sort, the ROI is the profit, right? So when you're speaking to an investor, the profit is give us $10,000, we'll give you 50% return on investment, we'll give you back $15,000. They're excited by that. In the grants world, that is not usually the case. There are some grants where they are actually focused on that. But most grants, their return on investment is impacts, the impact that they see, because everyone is accountable to somebody. Everyone reports to someone. I report to University of Toronto as my funder. University of Toronto got that money from the city of Toronto. So they report to the city of Toronto. But the city of Toronto got that money from the province of Ontario, who got that money from, the federal government, who then got that money from taxpayers. So everyone is reporting something to someone. That is ROI for them that they can report. So you want to understand what this ROI is quickly and really make sure you're aligning and you're showing them that you're not begging for money. When you're applying for funding, you're not begging for money. You're inviting them into partnership. You're saying to the city of Toronto, I know the government gave you money and you need to deliver this 1,000 youths employed. I am the best candidate to partner with you because I will give you a return on investment in form of impact. And here is how I would do it. And then you list out the logical framework, you list out the theory of change and everything else we talked about. This is what makes for an application irresistible, and consequently this is what makes your project fundable. This is what you should be doing before your project. Now, this is a pre-checklist that I want, in addition to everything else I talked about, that I want us to have. This is a 14-point checklist that makes for a strong project. So if you're going to live here, take a screenshot of this and go and figure out what is the project that you're going to create and what are the different pre-application checklists and pieces of the project narrative as shown on the screen that you're going to create as part of being ready for when you start looking for funding. And I will also say there's so much creativity that should go into project design, because to your point, I think that was Rotimi, as an e-commerce, the e-commerce store itself might not be a project per se, but there's things that you're doing within that e-commerce that are projects. I know, I want to give an example. There's a girl that has beauty products, e-commerce based primarily. But one of the projects that she has created is supporting other e-commerce brands to commercialize, right? And so that becomes capacity building, that becomes economic development and things of that sort. And so she's been able to create projects around that. So figure out ways to be creative. Let's talk about Granted. There's so many grants that as a for-profit organization we cannot qualify for, but we've been so creative in that we've created multiple projects, and one of those projects is our Grant Academy, which is what this webinar falls under. And the mandate of our Grant Academy is funding readiness for entrepreneurs, especially marginalized entrepreneurs. And now we can go with this project to the government of Canada, or even partner with other nonprofits that might be more eligible for funding than us, as we have, and we have won that funding. And we can go and say, look, there's so many founders that have good ideas, and we know Canada is you want more ventures built in Canada, but they don't have capital. And a lot of them cannot afford to go the debt route. They cannot afford to go the VC route, especially when there's non-diluted funding on the table. But they don't know how to access non-diluted funding. So our proposal is, we've built the Grant Academy where we'll teach them how to get funding. We use our technology to help them match to funding, etc., etc. That is a project within the broader organization that funders can fund and have funded in the past. And now, part of what that funding does, it covers some software, because to run this project, so I'm using Canva, I'm using Google Workspace. Ayo is my marketing person. I need to market this project. And now this funding now funds my core company operations. It pays for my marketing, it pays for my software. You see what I did there? I didn't go and ask for money for granted, because no one is going to give me money for granted in this particular case. But I built a project that is specific to what funders are already really aligned with. And I got funding to cover my core operations to some extent, right? So that is how you structure that. And so these are the different project pieces that you want to make sure you have ahead of time. And because of time, I'm just going to quickly do a 5-minute demo of the platform and how we build the platform to help you do this in a fraction of the time, so that we can move along. But I'll pause quickly for questions. Okay, so while I'm doing the demo of the product, Ayo will put a link in the chat on where you can, if you haven't already, go and sign up on Granted. And yeah, sign up and leverage the platform to discover grants, to manage your grants, all those problems that we identified, and most importantly, to design your projects with this pre-application checklist that we talked about. And for the folks on this call only, you guys get 50% off for your first month of our subscription. You get a 14-day free trial if you haven't already, and then you get 50% for 1 month. And I will add the code in the chat, but also in our follow-up resources. But yeah, let's do a quick look through of the product here and how you can leverage Granted to really make things easy for yourself. Once you're logged in, this is what the dashboard looks like. If you're new, you probably have right here a checklist, onboarding checklist on some of the things that you need to do to get your profile to a level of 100% completeness, because this is important. The more we know about you and your venture and your projects, the more we can align and connect you to funding. And this is an example of what my profile looks like, and the questions will ask you, your application type, your funding preferences, your narrative, what's your organization's mission, vision, description, other funding you've received, and things of that sort, so that we can properly tailor our recommendations and your projects to that. Additionally, you're also able to add on collaborators, and this is dependent on the type of packaging you have. You can add up to 10 collaborators on the platform, and this is if you've got grant writers on your team, your co-founders, anyone that you want visibility into your applications so that you can collaborate. That's important, because I'll shortly show you the management platform where you can manage, as in track your grant applications. I'm just going to quickly scroll here. So this is our funnel. You can see the grants that you save, the grant that you're preparing, and you can tag your team members. If we go here, you can add comments and tag your team members the same way that you would on a Slack or an Asana, but really tracking everything that's happening to that application in one place. You'll do that here. But anyway, going back to our dashboard, there's 5 main things that our platform is designed to do, and that is what makes for a complete life cycle of a grant, give or take. There's the pre-application phase, which is the project design, which we've talked about today. Once you have your project design, there's discovery. Now you match that project to funding. Now that your project is matched to funding, you obviously want to create an application for that. And part of concurrently to creating an application is the management, the making sure everything is ready as part of that. So that's the 4th one. And like I mentioned, you get the funding. That's only the beginning. You have to report on that funding. And that's the 5th cycle, grant application. And all along, all of that is obviously relationship building. And so we've automated this so you can also focus on building those relationships with funders and counselors, etc. But yeah, quick walkthrough. Discovery allows you to discover multiple opportunities that are available to you. So currently, we've got over 2,000 grants that are available. These are particularly North American grants, Canada and the US. But if you're an African customer, we are going to the African markets next. And it's actually such an advantage for you because everything on our platform you can use. The only challenge is that our database being prioritized for North American grants. And so if you're a user and you are maybe based in Africa, your projects are based in Africa and there's no grants for you here, you're at an advantage because our team can tailor search for grants for you and bring them on the platform, and you will be almost guaranteed to have a grant that's a match for you because we're searching for grants just for you. So there's obviously traditional filters that you can use. You can select different funder types. Maybe you're serving immigrants, and all of these different pieces. So you do that and you apply your filters, and all the fundings that are a match for you will show up here. And what you do once you see a grant that's a match for you, so let's go with this grant. So this is what you see when you click on grant. You have the opportunity to save it, to share it with copy and pasting a link, and then you can create a project specifically for this grant, or I'll go back and show you how you can create a general project first, which is always my recommendation. Create a project in general first so that you understand what you're looking for funding for, and so that your project is not necessarily tied to one particular funder. Because if you do it this way, we'll create a perfect project for you, but it will be a project that is tailored to this particular funder and particular grant, which is not bad, but it just means it might be challenging for you to use it for other grants. So I usually recommend the opposite. Create a general project first, and I'll show you in a second. This is so important. This part of our platform is so important because it gives you a snapshot of everything that is eligible for the funding. So you're not applying or reading through 1,000 documents to find what project is eligible. Additionally, there's all this additional information here, which is like, what are the key timelines that you should be keeping in mind? Those are listed out. And our platform also has the ability to integrate with your calendar. So you can get calendar notification in real time. The documentation that is needed, you'll be able to see that here. Contact information for program managers, you can see that here, and that's important to know. And then your level of readiness. Right now, I currently have my eligibility and organization type done, but I haven't created a project budget as well as an application form. So I'm 1/3 done, and that's pretty much reflected here in my application readiness. So this shows me how many unmet checklists pieces I have. So that's the discovery. We also have the ability to discover grants here via AI, or AI's name is Gigiana. No, Giselle is her full name, but we call her Gigi. But yeah, so based on everything that's known about my project, this is a hyper focused grant matching piece here that is AI powered. And so that's why I see 9 matches. These are the strongest matches according to the algorithm based on the context that I've given it. In addition to that is the ability to really discover funders. This is so underrated because sometimes when you see one grant saved by the City of Toronto, you're like, oh, cool, exciting grant. But you don't know that the City of Toronto probably has 34 more grants in this example that you could also be a match for. So this allows you to discover additional opportunities. And here you have the ability to request additional insights, anything that you want to know about this funder. In the future, that's going to be all laid out for you here because we're trying to build technology for that. But essentially, you should be able to understand their giving patterns. Who have they given funding to in the past in case you want to reach out? What affinity do they have towards certain projects? Maybe the City of Toronto loves projects that are entrepreneurship focused, to create your project around that. How much do they usually give? What are the timelines of giving year on year? Because a lot of these timelines are repetitive every year. So you want to know all of that, and that will be given to you here. And ability to request grants. Maybe a grant is not on our platform and you found it somewhere else. You can put the information here and our team will add that detail for you here. Now, the piece that we talked about that is most important is that project creation piece. I'm going to ask Marshall, let's go with you because you had asked, can you put one sentence in the chat if you're still on the call on what your business does? And we're going to try and create a project based on that one sentence. It doesn't have to be super long, just one sentence on what your business does. And we're going to say Marshall's business. Marshall's business. Okay, there we go. You can write it yourself, but what's the whole point of writing yourself if Gigi can do it for you? So we'll create and start. And so these are the things that we talked about, the 14 pre-application checklists that you need to have for your project. So problem statement, a clear definition of the issue, evidence and context where possible, lived experience. Obviously, our AI does not have your lived experience. And this is where that human intelligence HI piece comes in, urgency and relevance. So anyway, let me generate a response. So let's generate with Gigi and see what she'll do for us in a matter of seconds, really. So there we go. So this is a problem statement that has been created for you, Marshall. So Marshall, I don't know if it's ringing true to what your venture is actually trying to solve for, but this is a starting point. So even if you had no idea what to create for a problem statement, you can go in and say, now you understand your problem a bit better. You have language to describe your problem in a matter of seconds. And with the human intelligence piece, you can go in and add an example of like, take Justina, for example, and then you talk about Justina. So if I'm satisfied with this problem statement, I will simply accept it. Now, a solution, we're going to generate what potential solution it is. And this is, again, based on the one sentence you gave us, but it's also generating this context from what it knows about my venture. Because remember, as part of creating your profile, you're creating what is your business name, your business mission, vision. So this project is not standalone from your business. It is actually related to your business. And so it says Marshall's business directly addresses the monetization through a comprehensive creator-centric platform. Our solution provides a unified ecosystem where creators can effectively manage, market, and sell diverse. It offers tools for creators to host and sell. Cornerstone of the business is cross-border payment collection. So all of those pieces, if I'm in acceptance with it, I can do that. But I also have the opportunity to refine, and refining is essentially adding exactly what I want the AI to take into consideration or regenerate altogether. But I'll just accept it for this context. So that is everything that comes pre-application. So you go on and do it for all of these sections, add on your own input where necessary. And I kid you not, in less than 10 minutes, 30 minutes tops, you will have a fully fundable project, a project that aligns with a lot of what the funders are looking to hear, and a project that is fully fleshed out. And now the next step that comes after that now is matching to funding, which once you have the project ready, you will see that you have grant recommendations that will pop up here. It's not going to pop up now because we don't have enough context on this project yet. So there's a couple of them already. There we go. So there's some funding for you on the platform, Marshall. Any grants that I save, if I save this grant here, I'll be able to see it in my grants. So all the grants that attach to this particular project would be here. And then if I have applications going, I would probably have them right here as part of my project dashboard. So yeah, there's so much more our product can do. I will pause here for now because I just wanted this to focus on everything that comes before application. There's the ability to apply for grants, the ability to manage tasks like I talked about, and reporting is up and coming. So many things you can do. And one thing in particular to note is you have the ability also here to save all your documents. so that everything is centralized and you're not scrambling around when it's application time. But I'm not going to do a full product demo because I just wanted to focus on everything that comes before application. And I think we've done that here. So I'll pause for questions. And IO is also hosting, I believe, next week, a session which is going to be a product walkthrough. So if you want a more in-depth walkthrough IO, if we can put that link in the chat for folks, IO will be doing that. And if and when you're a user and a customer for us, you also have the ability to have one-on-ones with our team as part of our office hours that we host every month. And we host these educational webinars every month as well, because we have Granted Academy, and education is a huge part of accessing the knowledge and the funding. Okay, so I'll stop here. Any questions and thoughts? Yes, where all of your events listed. They're going to be on our Luma page. If you're in the Granted platform, and under resources, you should be able to see all our events here. You should be able to see all our events here. We have additional perks as well. Actually, if you're a founder, we have this interesting feature where our team aggregates all additional perks that you can access. They're not necessarily through us, but these are through our partners and perks that are available everywhere else, because we don't want you to just get money through grants. If we can help it, we want to help you save money. And I always give an example of this. We use HubSpot for our sales and marketing. And what we were quoted was about $4,000 per month for our team, which is obviously a lot. But with this 90% off, we pay about $250, not even, per month for those technologies and tools. So there's a lot of interesting perks here that you can leverage in addition to that. And then there's additional playbooks. If you're more of a reading learner, go and read some of these articles that we've created, and also guides that we've created on how to access the platform. Those are all available here. Grand Dictionary, which is just to really understand language, like when they're asking you for an acquittal report, what is an acquittal report? You're able to find that here. And then all the events will be listed here, as well as on our Luma page. And when we have an event coming up, there's usually a banner that shows up on our landing page and on the website here. So those are the places. Alrighty, this has been so exciting on my end. I really appreciate you being an engaging team